fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to another episode of Falcons Trench Talk here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host, he is Jordan Watkins, at Big 75 Fella. We're here for week 10, and things have obviously not gone as planned. Falcons in the midst of a 3-game losing streak. I don't think anyone's most pessimistic projections did they have the Falcons going into the bye at 4-6 when they were 4-3 going into this stretch of games, which included the gauntlet of the Titans, the Vikings, and the Cardinals, and what was the other one? The Commanders.
Commanders in there.
Yep. So, this truly difficult gauntlet where the Falcons have gone 1-3 against, it's bad luck. It's a bad look, Jordan, but if you guys have watched the post-game shows, you know how we feel about it, but we're going to talk about it some more. And of course, no one better to do that with than Jordan Watkins. Jordan, how are we doing today?
Well, first of all, I feel so honored that you said that. I'm all right. It's just, now we're at a situation. Hey, we're at the bye week. Honestly, too, I know I've been one of the forefronts for a long time about the Arthur Smith questions around him and how he operates. Look, I mean, it pretty much came out in that Jeff Schultz article, right? He's not going anywhere. So you're not getting that from me anymore. And now it's more so about what can I hope to see from this team going forward that can still bring at least some sense of optimism. That's I'm just saying that now. You're no longer going to hear the Arthur Smith needs to go. He's not the guy. That's not me anymore. There's already pretty much been set in stone unless things really go south and we finish with a 4-13 record. So you won't hear it from me. That's not how I'm going anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think either one of us seriously thought that there was any chance of him getting fired mid-season or at least during the bye week. I know a lot of fans have been pushing for that, and it's your right as fans to call for people to be fired. That's one of the most fun things you can do as a fan when things are going terribly. I understand that completely. But knowing Arthur Blank, we know that that's very unlikely to happen. He just doesn't do that.
Of course. But I do understand it from this standpoint. There's another team coming into this year, and I'm not saying this to say that the Falcons had Super Bowl aspirations this year, right? Not doing that. Yeah. We did have aspirations, and I guess technically just based off of how the division looks, still do have aspirations of winning the NFC South. But there is another team out there that they made changes, right? Not changes to the head coach, didn't fire the head coach, but there's a team that had Super Bowl aspirations coming into this year. They just made changes, right? Talking about the Buffalo Bills. They changed their offensive coordinator, right? But here's the thing that's interesting to me, right? In terms of when the change happened and how they looked when it happened. So shout out to Mina Kimes at ESPN. She does a phenomenal job. She had this tweet earlier, or post, sorry, I don't want to get in trouble. Bills offense through week 10. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want to be careful. Bills offense for week 10. Third in DVOA, first in success rate, third in EPA per play, fourth in QBR, third in yards per play, second and third down conversion percentage, and third in red zone efficiency. And they made a change at offensive coordinator.
It sounds pretty good. It sounds like the offense wasn't the problem to me, but I mean,
well, the thing is, to an extent, the Bills are in an interesting situation. I know they have a lot of injuries on defense. Tre'Davious White, I think, is out for the year. Milano's out for a while.
It's a huge one.
A lot of the big time dudes are out and hurt. But the offense, the big problem has been Josh Allen turns the ball over.
Yeah.
So, there's certain things that you can't really change that. I just found it interesting, though. I want to make the comparison of that's a team that they have some aspirations. Obviously, they're falling short of what they need to do. Again, they didn't fire Sean McDermott, but they did make a change in terms of the play calling or the hierarchy of it. And so that's something I think Falcons fans would like to see or be interested in seeing, just some changes in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. And then we will definitely get into a discussion about that too. Real quick, want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, betonline.ag. Folks, the last of the major pro sports leagues is off and rolling. That's right, college basketball is ready to go, along with the NHL getting fired up here and the NBA, of course, in full swing now. And BetOnline, it remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. You can get the NFL, college football, UFC, NHL, NBA. They're all going. BetOnline is your number one source for your wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions for all of those sports. You can get all your hoops betting action along with the NFL through the Super Bowl and college football through the college football playoff. They're all available at your fingertips through both desktop and now mobile access at any time with BetOnline. And make sure, guys, head to that website, betonline.ag today. And remember to use our promo code. It's BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Definitely check that out, guys. BetOnline, where the game starts. And yeah, Jordan, you brought up a good point. And that's that, Arthur Smith has come out and said, like, we're not planning on making any staff changes during the bye, which I guess doesn't surprise me either. But I think you bring up a good point with Dorsey, where it's like that offense, statistically speaking, is drastically better than Atlanta's. They're one of the best in the NFL, and they still felt like they needed to make a change there. I don't know if it's like one of those things where, is this like a change for the sake of change thing, kind of like how the Falcons fired Steve Sarkisian in 2018. Will this be looked back upon as a mistake, or is this like something to spark a change on the offense? And it's really hard to know at the time, but as much as fans don't want to hear it, it's very rare that a coach firing actually sparks some sort of significant change. Now, you can see a lot of times there's a bump, like what we're seeing with the Raiders right now, sort of like, I forget what's the terrible phrase? Pierce. Yeah, what's the terrible phrase they use? The dead cat bounce or something like that when you fire a coach and you win a couple games. It's a terrible phrase, but whatever you want to call it, probably something. I got my cat in my lap, so he's probably upset with me saying that. But whatever you want to call it, like there is sometimes a little bit of like a bounce after you sort of had that weight lifted, but it rarely translates to like significant change in season. Now, obviously, it can be a step towards a major change in the off season, but you have to think that's why they're trying to keep continuity, because honestly, they're probably thinking, well, we're not likely to get a whole lot better, by shuffling pieces. It's like shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic with this team at this point. So, yeah.
Well, first I'll tell your cat that's one life down, 8 to go. Like it'll be okay. But I will say this. I think there is something about certain changes in-house. And again, like I said, not head coach firings per se, but there is something to say about the in-house changes, because now everyone in the locker room knows, it's like, okay, no, they're for real about being all in, right? So if you look at, you talk about Las Vegas and Josh McDaniels, which again, if you ask me, was a terrible hire in the first place. But, you make that change, everyone in the locker room understands and knows, okay, ownership, Mark Davis, all those guys, they're bought into this. They really want to. They're not just going to sit here and be like, well, we're in the division with the Chiefs. They're going to win the AFC West, and that's that. No, they made a change because they're still trying to win. You look at Buffalo. Now, again, I don't think that letting Ken Dorsey go and then you bring in Joe Brady, I don't think that was the issue. But at least the locker room knows they're not tolerating, subpar performances. Right. They're not going to tolerate the record that they have right now, especially when you look at in your own division and you see what Miami's doing. And even though, Aaron Rodgers is out, who knows how long he's going to be out, because apparently he's defied science. That's kind of a double joke there, if anybody gets it. But even though, but who knows when he's going to be back from his Achilles? And that defense is good enough to keep them in games to where the offense can get a touchdown here or there. They can still win some games. Like, as crazy as it sounds, and I know like it was a bad game per se, that Sunday night game, the Jets are still in that division, division in terms of, or at least in the wild card race, right?
Yeah.
So, if you make a move like that, everyone in the locker room's like, hey, we got to stay 10 toes down, because the front office is showing they want to win. And I think that's where a lot of us as Falcons fans and people that watch the team, where we come in, and that's where we talk about it in terms of, if you see a move or you see something that shakes some things up, just remind that locker room again of like, hey, what we're doing right now this isn't acceptable. You have a head coach, again, he's supposed to be an offensive minded guy. We knew all about the run schemes and this and that, the other, but obviously like putting up the points per game that we're doing isn't good enough. Having possessions that start at the 14, the 1, and I think it was at the 24, I want to say, in the last 3 weeks, and only getting field goals off of that isn't good enough. So that's why, like, again, even if it wasn't going to be an Arthur Smith firing, which, like you said, we all expected that wasn't going to be the case, you would like to see at least some certain sense of hierarchy kind of get switched up there, just to, again, to remind the locker room of, this ain't it.
Yeah.
This is maybe the first 2 years, with the roster that we had, it's like, okay, you're struggling. It is what it is. But no, this year, nah, not good enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's, to me, the whole team just looks like it's stuck in mud. I mean, the execution across the board has been really sloppy during this losing streak. The defense's tackling has basically gone from being very good to being awful. I mean, I think they have like 20 missed tackles in the past 2 games or more. And that's like that was like half of their total going into this 3-game stretch they've had in like the last 2 games. So like, the whole team looks, I won't say it's not disinterested, but it's like everybody's screwing up. Everybody is making mistakes. The offense, it's a complicated issue. But I think, there's still a couple of camps. One camp is obviously like Arthur Smith is to blame for everything camp. There's definitely people that are like, well, it's multifaceted. And then there's people that are like, actually, Arthur Smith's fine. And, really it's that everybody else is screwing up. And it's in the middle, obviously. Like, it's never going to be all on one guy or another or whatever. But what I will point to
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, it's never just one person, ever. Like,
I hope people understand that, right? Like, I'm not, this is all on Arthur Smith. I'm a multifaceted guy. But I also understand how this all works. Like, if things go wrong, things go south. Obviously, Kevin, you know this too. Where is the biggest change? Like, you're not going to release all of a sudden 53 guys.
No.
You can release one guy, though. That's how this works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So like, the reason people go to the head coach, like you said, is that it's one move you make where you feel like it affects everything, and to some extent it does affect everything, but it doesn't necessarily fix everything. It can cause a whole other set of problems depending on what you're doing. So it's not that simple ever, but sometimes it can be a boost, and sometimes you need to do it. And of course, this is a question the team will be asking at the end of the season, depending on how it goes. But to me, the head coach, he's the offensive play caller and the head coach. So you have to think his purview is mostly on the offensive side of the football. I think we all know that. The defensive issues, it's like, I don't know who to blame when the tackling goes to shit, because it's like they were tackling great in the first, 7 games of the season, and then all of a sudden over the past 3 they've struggled. So it's like I don't know that you can blame the coaching staff for guys forgetting how to tackle, like, or just I mean, maybe they're trying to do too much. Like, I don't know what's going on exactly with that, but pretty much everyone has started tackling poorly. So, and again, I think it points to like the whole team feels like it's stuck in a rut, like they're just in this malaise. So maybe this is a scenario where the bye week is just coming at the right time, and it's like, okay, we can reset and get back on track here. But what I was gonna say with regards to the head coach is, especially when he's in charge of the offense, is there's a lot of problems with the offense that we've talked about, right? Like, we don't particularly like the play calling, the red zone play calling. It has gotten better over the past 2 games, I would say. Like, they have improved their red zone rate significantly. But, they've been helped out by a lot of penalties and going against some poor defenses here in the last couple of weeks. So that's part of it. But, a lot of people are saying, the route designs aren't creative and they're not creating any separation or spacing. And that's true. That's 100% on Arthur Smith. And then people are saying, well, the receivers are running lazy routes. And like, it's kind of, I mean, yeah, I would say that the routes for some of these guys aren't great, but I wouldn't say that, I would say the bigger issue is there's just not a lot of natural spacing with the route combinations to begin with. So like, if you don't run them perfectly, it's going to look muddy, because it's just, I don't really understand some of the concepts they're running. I mean, I'll leave that to the people that study passing games, because it's a whole field, it's something that really takes a lot to get into. I'll leave that to like JT O'Sullivan and those guys, but yeah.
And that's the thing.
Yeah. But
those
it's like
are the guys that are saying it. It's not us. It's them.
Don't ask me to tell you, why this particular situation is good against this or that. Like, I mean, we know, I know a fair amount, but I won't consider myself any sort of expert on, passing game concepts and how they relate to X, Y, and Z and all that. We're more informed than the average fan, and we like to give our takes, but we don't represent ourselves as offensive coordinators that are going to break down, every aspect of an offense and be able to tell you every play call. But when it's not just one player that's like, if it was one guy, it's like, oh, well, Van Jefferson's slacking on his routes, we should bench him. Basically, they're saying like, oh, well, every single player in the offense is running poor routes. Like Kyle Pitts is running lazy routes, Drake London's running lazy routes, everyone. So if that's the case, isn't that just an even further indictment on the coaching staff? Because there's no way all these guys just forgot how to run routes. Like,
so you make a really good point there, and I want to make this clear too. Obviously, my knowledge and experience is at the line of scrimmage, right? That's why we have this whole thing, Trench Talk. So I want people to understand. A lot of times when I'm saying something about routes and route concepts and spacing, I'm not doing it because of what I know, just, inherently. I'm asking other people who played receiver, who played corner, who played quarterback, what do they think about this offense? And what do they think about the spacing? And once they tell me something and it's like, oh, here's the reason why this doesn't look this way or that way, it's like, okay. And I keep that in mind, right? It's the same thing as if you go to school, you might go to school one day, and I'm just using this as an example. You might not know how to do multiplication, right? Like I'm just gonna do it like one of the very basic forms of math, right? But once you see somebody else do it, someone teaches it to you. After that, after a while, and you get certain reps with it, like maybe the first couple of times, right? Like let's say you have a 4 times 8. You might have to go to the teacher the first time. Is this 32? Yes, it is. Okay, cool. So I know what that is. And then you go back again. 7 times 7. Is that 40? No, it's 49. Oh, okay. I see where I messed up. I see where I got the difference. But after a while, once you get more and more consistent with it, and like more times you're right, that's when you start speaking on it. And that's, how I've kind of gotten to this point. Now, again, I'm not perfect with it. I know that. But when I'm saying certain things, because I'm learning it from people who really do know this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And same thing that you, Kevin, like you brought up JT O'Sullivan. I'm never going to know as much about running routes and running concepts as JT O'Sullivan will. I won't know it as much as Kurt Benkert. I won't know it as much as Kurt Warner and a lot of other people who have played this game on the offense, and especially quarterback, that I will never be able to talk about this offense and route schemes and concepts as much as they do. But what I will do is I'll listen to them.
Yeah. And
so if all of a sudden, let's just say next week or in 2 weeks after the Saints game, if they were to come out and say, oh man, like I saw some changes in what Arthur Smith is running and this is so great, I'm going to say like, okay, no, that makes sense. I see where they're coming from. But until then, it's no, I got to be critical of it. You got to be critical of it. That's just how this works.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, neither of us played quarterback. We don't understand the total complexity of it. That doesn't mean that we can't listen to other people who are informed and talk about the things they've brought up. And I think that's important to bring in. We're not just giving you our perspective. We're giving you our informed perspective from, consuming other content creators, other people that are doing great work out there. And I think that what they're saying makes sense, and I think it's legitimate, and it shouldn't be ignored. And I think that was part of why Arthur Smith's comments toward Kurt Warner were so problematic, because it's like, are you really questioning Kurt Warner's ability to evaluate a passing offense? I mean, we're talking like one of the GOATs here. Not that like I'm surprised he would not take criticism to his scheme kindly. I mean, as we've said many times, you have to have a big ego to be an NFL coach, especially an NFL head coach. There's no other way to survive in this league. So it's not terribly surprising.
It wasn't the fact that it was Kurt Warner. It's the fact that it was a repetitive message from a lot of other people that have had at least NFL experience like Kurt Warner's had.
Yeah.
That was, I think that was kind of the thing that really bugged people and rubbed them the wrong way. But I do want to say this, and this isn't about coaching. This is about the players. I was disappointed in the run game. And I get it. We put up a good amount of yards in this game, right? But why I say I'm disappointed is because, you go into certain games and you understand certain matchups, and you think, okay, this is where you should dominate. And again, I'm still waiting for that true Falcons game of, remember last year, we went into games, we always felt like no matter what, even if it was Mariota's quarterback or Ritter the last couple of games, we can rely on this run game where it's, hey, we're going to run the ball and there's nothing you can do to stop us. Now, obviously, this is an Arizona defense, as we've talked about before, not good.
Yep.
I wanted to come out of this game that sense of feeling of we just physically dominated them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think they had 2 D-line injuries in the game as well. And even though we did have a solid rushing attack in the game, I did not come out of that game again, like I'm saying, this is a feeling. It's not a, what do you mean? We rushed for X amount of yards, or, like that's not what I'm saying. Like there's a certain sense of a feel of a game, right? And I just didn't come out of that game feeling like we dominated them, which is crazy. I get it. We had 184 rushing yards. But again, whether it was certain play calling that kind of gave it away, maybe there's certain 0 yards or TFLs that were allowed, it just didn't feel like we dominated at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think a big part of that is the tight end blocking. Like, it's fallen off a cliff. And like, again, like I'm just going to continue to criticize making Kyle Pitts like a featured blocker in your offense. Like, I'm sorry, but like that's not what he does. Like, he's 6'6", 240, and you're asking him to block defensive ends. Like, it was never going to go well unless you had him bulk up to like 260, which I'm sure he could do, but then he's not Kyle Pitts anymore. You're turning him into like an inline tight end. Right. And again, that's not Kyle Pitts. So like, I mean, I think we all expected Kyle Pitts to be lining up outside and blocking corners, where I think he'd probably dominate cornerbacks in the run game, but instead
it looked better.
It would look better. I mean, he's not ever going to be a guy that's this elite run blocker, but again, that's not why you drafted him. That's, I think we've seen him be a passable run blocker at times, and that's basically what you should be expecting. Like, if you wanted a 2-way blocking tight end, they should have waited and drafted Sam Laporta in the 2nd round. Like if that's what you really wanted, you should have waited for that instead of spending a top 5 pick on a guy that's a receiver that maybe can block on occasion. But we've brought that up a bunch of times. It's really like the other guys, like obviously Parker Hesse, who they didn't even put on the active roster, which was weird. Mm-hmm. He's on IR. But like aside from him, nobody has run blocked well at all. Michael Pruitt has fallen off a cliff in terms of his run blocking. John Fitzpatrick has not been playing. I think he's played like 8 total snaps this year. Jonnu Smith, good pass blocker. He's been pass blocking quite well. Same with Kyle Pitts, actually, funny enough. But Jonnu Smith as a run blocker is not good. And for the same reasons as Kyle Pitts, right? He's a smaller move tight end. That's just not his game. And so none of the tight ends have run blocked well. And that was a core part of what they did. And what they are trying to do is get those tight ends to make blocks on the outside. They're not succeeding. Tucker Fisk on 13 run blocks is the only guy with like above a 60 in run blocking. He has a 74.4. And he's only blocked 13 times.
He was playing, and part of that too was he was playing at fullback last week because Keith Smith was out with a concussion. So
yeah. Even Keith Smith is having a down year. Yeah, exactly. Even Keith Smith's having a down year. So like they're not getting good run blocking from any of these pieces that they've sort of depended on in the past. And to me, it's odd that they didn't, since this being such a core part of the offense, to not invest in a great run blocking tight. I mean, I get Michael Pruitt has traditionally been a very good run blocker, so him falling off, couldn't really foresee that happening. But like Parker Hesse, that it didn't even seem like he was really in their plans, weirdly, like since he was on the practice squad and they were, maybe they were playing some kind of game with that. I don't know. But, he goes on IR and all of a sudden your one blocker is Michael Pruitt and he's not blocking well. So now you don't really have any answers there. I think that's a low key reason why the run game is struggling a lot, because you look at the offensive linemen and like they haven't been as dominant outside of maybe like Lindstrom and, Drew Dahlman. The other guys haven't been as dominant as they've been in years past, but like they've been fine. I don't know that the offensive line itself is run blocking terribly, but they've lost that edge at tight end. And I think that is, especially on the outside zone stuff, that has been sort of one of the keys that maybe has come into focus after sort of seeing this over the course of the first 10 games.
And so you saying that's what gets me again back to the point that I was saying earlier, or I've said for a few weeks now, in terms of letting or putting your players in a position to succeed. If you can turn on the tape and you see your tight ends are struggling on the outside, again, let's do some more things up the middle. Let's the inside zone again. I love seeing Bijan hitting the hole and just going right. Yeah. Even if you go back to last year when Cordero had a lot of his touches, a lot of big gains. It wasn't wait, go. It was go right away. Tyler Algier, same thing. We've seen some of those like counters that have worked really well, where they'll show it, the quarterback shows it one way and then they hand it off the other. You get the linebackers to flow to get the edge for your offensive lineman, get into that second level, and that works. So it's just, I would like to see some more things like that. Again, one thing I will give Arthur Smith credit for, and we've seen it, is he is a creative run designer.
Yeah.
So let's try to design some different inside run schemes instead of that outside zone, because of the disparity that we have right now on the edge that you mentioned, and let's attack that way, because it does work. It works this game. We've seen it work in weeks past. And one of the things I want to do in these next 2 weeks, I'm going to rewatch the first Saints game from last year, because obviously, as everyone knows, like, we should have won that game. Maybe if it's not for a Marcus Mariota fumble, that looks a little different, but there were just certain times in that game you could feel the Falcons imposing their will on the Saints, especially in the run game. Of course, one of the biggest memories I have of it, I believe actually it was Caden Ellis, but Cordero has that run by the goal line and just runs that linebacker over. Could have been Caden Ellis, maybe Pete Werner. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's one of those examples where I say, like, hey, that defense, or like if you're watching a game when you can just feel that, a run game is imposing their will, that's the type of stuff that I want to see. Let these guys get downhill and run that way. And I'm telling you, nothing gets an O-line more excited and more ready to block than a downhill run game that's working.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we all want to see that. I think that's one of the keys to why the offense has been so inconsistent, is because the running game, which was probably the most reliable part of the offense last year without question, has not been nearly as reliable at generating consistent yardage on first and second down, on any down, really. So it's, yeah.
And I was going to say, on that note too, one thing I'd also love to see, if you are going to continuously stick with the outside zone, where is that play with, let's say you have Pitts just off the line, but still as a right there next to Jake Matthews or whoever, or McGarry, you show outside zone, but you bring your tight end across the formation and you boot out. And then boom, there's that easy flat throw. Now you let Pitts be an athlete and gain a couple yards there. Like, where are those counters that get the defense off balance? I haven't seen a lot of those as of late. I remember, oh my goodness, I think this is like the Tony Gonzalez era. That was one of the plays that worked for Matt Ryan so much with Michael Turner, where it's like they're showing that outside zone, they're showing that stretch play, then you boot out the other way, boom, there it is. I haven't seen that a lot this year off the top of my head. And I think that's something where if you show that a lot, it just puts a thought right into, especially that second level, puts a thought in their head of like, hey, I got to stay home a little bit more on this, because they really could bring somebody else this way. I just haven't seen a lot of tight ends being used in a sniffer spot, in a sniffer position, where they could be potentially a pass catcher as well as something to think about. I'd like to see that a little bit more too.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of things in this offense that, to me, like that they could do, or they could change to fix the tight end blocking issues. We've talked about a lot is like make Kyle Pitts your wide receiver too. Like, who's the other wide receiver you're trying to get looks out opposite Drake London? I mean, honestly, like who? Like, Van Jefferson's doing nothing. Scotty Miller is clearly just a occasional, wide receiver 4 type guy. Mac Hollins has been more or less relegated to Drake London's backup, and unfortunately, when he had a chance to play that role, he immediately got hurt, so that sucked for him and for the Falcons, who had nobody to play that role without Drake London and Mac Hollins. But to me, it's like I just can't understand. Like, you look at, like, I posted this on Twitter. Look at what the Bills did with Dalton Kincaid. On his touchdown, it's like, oh, had him lined up outside, and what do you know? They created some space with these routes, and Kincaid streaking down the sideline and wide open for a touchdown. Obviously, the route combination created a nice coverage bust there, so he was wide open. But to me, I don't see why we're not even giving Kyle Pitts opportunities to make those types of plays. Like, there's no creativity in his usage whatsoever. He's basically been relegated to just being in line, like almost just huge majority of the time in line or in the slot. I think this last game he played 38 snaps in line and like 10 everywhere else. And I think by now in year 3, I think we were expecting to see Kyle Pitts playing out wide. like that was the natural evolution of his game, to be more like a Jimmy Graham type, to play more outside of an inline role, particularly when we know his run blocking is not really fantastic. And I think the other side of that coin is that you can still use two tight ends. We know they want to, and they have two good ones in Jonnu and Kyle Pitts, but these aren't like your blocking tight ends. So why don't you have one of them in line and then the other one lined up out wide and spread the defense out more? Because if you can't find success in that condensed front because your tight ends can't block, then spread them out and make it easier for your running back instead of having him have to navigate all that traffic or have guys crashing in all the time. There's a lot more room to work if you spread them out. And I think we saw, what game was it? I know it was late. I think it was late in that Titans game, that they did start spreading them out on Heineke's sort of comeback drive. And they had a lot of success running the football against that Titans defense that had mostly shut it down early by spreading them out and just sort of, they were able to execute those run concepts and get space a little bit easier. So that there are other ways to generate space. And I'm just surprised, given how poor the tight end blocking has been, that there's been basically no effort to sort of switch things up and create space otherwise.
And to that point, if you do not space them out by alignment, guess what that means? Zone coverage.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself in a position to better understand and know what the defense is lining up in, even if they don't want to go out there and do that. So again, it's just some slight differences that I think would be helpful and just help this team out. But yeah, man, it's like I said, I'm not going to keep going into the fire Arthur Smith or he needs to go thing. I'm past that now. It's just, okay, with what we do have and what's there, what would I like to see, right? To salvage this season, because I still fully believe, this is still a play. This, like, talent wise, people can disagree with me if they want. I don't care. This is a playoff team, especially this year. This is a team that can win this division, especially this year. So that's how I'm looking at things. And obviously, I know we still got to get to the defense. And I mean, really, the thing for me with the defense is two things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One, can we stop with the coverage bus? Like, that's something that's been happening so many times. But most importantly, again, I think the main thing I would say for the defense is get back to the basics. And I say that in terms of course, like you talked about tackling. That's been a problem the last few weeks. I think I even said last week before the Arizona game, I said, I think it was the Vikings game where I said, it just feels like it's the most amount of missed tackles I've seen in a game all year. So, that's one thing they need to get back to. But also on top of that, it's understanding your rush lanes. Like that's the thing for me. Like, I get it. You went against two mobile quarterbacks now, right? With Josh Dobbs and Kyler Murray. Now, those guys, when they start scrambling, they look to run a little bit more. Now, the way it looks like with Derek Carr's injuries, you're going against Jameis, right? Now, Jameis is much more of a pocket guy than those last two, but we have seen through his career, whether it's at Florida State, Tampa Bay, and now in New Orleans, he will use his legs to extend plays.
Yeah.
So you have to be disciplined in your rush lanes to make sure that he can't do that. Now, for anyone at home who's concerned or questioning, is like, what do you mean by rush lanes? Here's what I'm saying. If you have, let's say you have a 4-man rush, right? Okay, so the ends on both sides, you rush the upfield shoulder. So let's say Jameis is a right-handed quarterback, right? He's looking to throw. You rush that right shoulder, not the left. Because if you rush the left, he has room to bounce outside. Okay. Now, for the two tackles on the inside, you have to you're trying to go at a certain point. So if you're on the left side, you're that left D tackle, you got to rush the left side. Yeah, the left side of Jameis's left shoulder. Okay, so boom, you're there. And obviously on the other side, you got to rush the right side. That's what I mean about rush lanes. Because again, you look at the most important play probably of this Cardinals game, when Kyler had that 3rd and 10 scramble, Arnold Ebiketie did not rush his upfield shoulder. That's why Kyler could spin around and get out. So I would like to see the Falcons get back to basics and understanding some of those principles when it comes to the Saints game.
Yeah, and it's just wild that they did the exact same thing twice in a row. Where it's like, oh,
I know.
they got out of it. I mean, I think it's just guys feel so desperate, like they have to make the play. Like, oh, we have to make this play, and like they just they lose their discipline, you know. And I think the whole team feels that way. It's like everyone feels so pressed and so strung out to try to make something happen because of the direction that this team is going, that they've stopped doing the fundamental things right. Like they're rounding off routes, they're, you know, missing tackles, going for the big hit. They're just focusing on trying to strip the ball. They're not maintaining their rush lanes, like you mentioned. I mean, the whole team just looks so sloppy. And add to that, you know, the Falcons are now, I think, 32nd in special teams grade according to PFF. So, you know, just add that on top. So,
well, I think a big part of that too is, of course, it's the punt return. I think that's probably why they have that grade. Because you look at a kickoff, they really haven't given up that many big kickoffs. Usually, Bradley Pinion's putting it in the end zone for touchbacks. Young Weku's been consistent, one of the best kickers in the league. What else is there? I mean, you know, punt. Obviously, they gave up that big return to Dortch in that Cardinals game, but for the most part, they haven't given up big things. Now, I would like to see Pinion be a little bit more consistent in terms of his punt depth and where we're changing field position. But the main cause that you look at things as to why they could be that low is because they don't get anything out of the punt return game.
Yeah.
And not only do they not get anything in terms of yards, they give up a lot of yards.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the disappointing part, and I can understand that, you know, that's why they're there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we're just seeing, you know, and it just to me comes back to the coaching. It's like if the whole team feels dragged down by this stuff, if all phases are struggling, you know, players across the board are having sloppy mistakes and all this stuff, you know, it's easy if it's one player screwing up, you know, when it was just Mike Hughes, it's like, oh, well, maybe it's Mike Hughes is the problem, or, you know, maybe, you know, Richie Grant's the problem in coverage. He's having all these coverage busts, or, you know, maybe, you know, it's Bud Dupree who can't finish a sack or something like that. Like, but it's everyone. It's like, oh, Arnold Ebikete's joining in, and there's even Calais Campbell's missing a tackle, and like, you know, like everyone looks sloppy. Everyone looks out of sorts, and you know, it to me that just I don't know exactly what it means, but it looks like a team that's just sort of floundering. That, you know, it's in disarray. Like this team is in disarray from top to bottom, and I think, you know, people are like, oh, well, the players are messing up. It's like, well, you have, like, there's nowhere else to point. If every player is messing up, it has to be coaching to some extent. And like, obviously Jerry Gray's not telling the DBs to miss a tackle or coaching them to do that. It's not that simple, but it's more like, why is everyone making mistakes? Why is the team look so undisciplined? And that to me goes back to that. So
yeah, no, that's right. It just feels like, to an extent, everybody in that building is stressed.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. And I'll put it in terms that I think everybody can understand, whether you play football, not football, organized sports or not. When you get stressed out by something, you know, you overthink certain things, and you over try to do certain things. And when you over try it and it doesn't go right, well, guess what? That just makes you want to try even harder. And when you try even harder, you get more frustrated. It's like, oh my goodness, what's going on? It's not working. Like you panic. And you almost do the things that even the things that you do every single day that are just kind of routine for you, they don't feel routine anymore. And that's what it kind of feels like with this team right now. It's almost like, you know, when SpongeBob didn't know how to tie his shoes. All of a sudden, you can't tie your shoes, and everything else just goes kind of off the rails, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of feels like right now. Where, you know, again, you look at the first 5-6 weeks of the season, we were talking about how great of a tackling team this defense was. And we're talking about the pressures. And well, the reason why pressures were there is because people are at least disciplined in their rush lane. So people aren't scrambling and, you know, getting here or there. Like, for example, again, and this is where I say, like, you know, you have to look at pressures in terms of context. I'm sure the Falcons probably got a pressure for that Kyler Murray first down scramble.
Did. Yeah.
You know, so, but it's like, all right, cool, you got the pressure, but you also gave a first down. So that's not a good pressure. So it's just one of those things where, again, I like I said, I just want, hopefully the bye week will allow people to decompress, get back to basics. Because I think if you come out in a game, and now this is a you know, a very good opponent that you're going up against. I don't care what the record says. It's a very good opponent, divisional rival. They hate them. I mean, they hate us. We hate them. If certain things go right early in the game, I think everybody will just kind of deep exhale and say, oh yeah, this is who we are and what we can do. And you get back into letting the routine things be routine again.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think at this point, like they desperately need this bye, and they don't have any more room for error. Like to get back to a winning record, you have to go 5-2. So they blew all of their chances to have, you can afford 2 slip ups over the next 7 games. That's not a great setup. Now, that being said, it's not like it's a murderer's row you have to play, but it wasn't a murderer's row the last 3 games, and they lost all of them. So you got to play the Saints twice, who are probably the best team left on your schedule, and they're not very good. And are probably going to be without Michael Thomas and Marshawn Lattimore for at least the first one of those games. Mm-hmm. And it seems like Carr's probably going to be back for that game, but who knows?
Be careful about that Jets game though. That defense is I said, I get it. Yeah. The offense might be what it is with Zach Wilson. That defense is good enough to win them some games.
Yeah, so you can't take the Jets for granted, but it's you can't take any of these opponents for granted. I mean, it's the Falcons we're talking about here, but it's like Bears, Colts, Panthers again, and Bucks. That's it. Like, there's nobody there that's really, other than the Saints, that's even sniffing a winning record at this stage. So, like, I mean, I guess the Colts are probably better than expected, but they're, we're not really talking like unbeatable or anything like that. So you don't have a lot of excuses here. Like, but now you have to go on this hot streak to end the season, or you're.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what we're doing here, and I know this Jeff Schultz article definitely made it seem like Smith's probably safe, but I mean, I think the expectation is still that they make the playoffs, and if they don't, I think there's going to be questions, and there's at least going to be somebody fired. I'm not exactly sure who it's going to be, but I do expect someone to get someone's going to fall on the sword. Yeah, so
there'll be some changes.
Yeah, so. It's been frustrating. I know you guys are all frustrated as well, as we are, watching this team scuffle around the past 3 weeks. But the bye week is the one time where you can see a team actually make some substantial changes. It's really the only time during the season that you're going to see that. So this is their shot. And the good news for the Falcons, despite everything, is that they play the Saints for first place in the division somehow. They're 4-6, and they're playing for first place in the division after the bye. So. You win that. Look, and there's one thing. If there's one thing that Falcons fans will take as an olive branch for Arthur Smith, it's beating the Saints. Like, you beat the Saints, it'll get you a long way. It'll get you a long way with fans.
A little bit better if you beat the Saints. Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll earn you It'll earn you a week or two of reprieve if you beat the Saints. So, especially if you sweep them. If he goes 9-8 and sweeps the Saints, fans might be like, well. Okay.
That's the other part about this. We're 2-0 in the division right now.
Yeah.
Which
they're just going to go 6-0. They're going to be like 6-0 in the division at like 8 wins. It's going to be hilarious. But,
oh my gosh.
Just oof. But I hope they can get it done, because I'm going to do a mock draft this week, guys, as I promised when they lost to the Cardinals.
Here we are.
I'm hoping that'll be the last one I have to do for a while. But
I did see one earlier, because I think we're in 9th right now.
We are.
I believe it'll be our pick.
Yes.
So I saw one that had us taking Liatu Latu at 9, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yep. If only we didn't have to take a quarterback.
I was going to say, I also saw Michael Penix wasn't. I also saw Michael Penix wasn't drafted yet either on that one. So
it's Jaden Daniels' season, Jordan. So I'm just saying. Yeah.
To you.
Yeah. To me, I like Penix. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Really, the only question with Penix is how terrified are teams of those medicals. I think he certainly has the talent to go in the top 10.
Yep.
It's not really a question of that.
Well, and that's the thing for me. You protect your quarterback. You don't have to worry about medicals as much.
That's true. I don't know that I trust the Falcons to be that team, but
Fair enough.
But I think we might need the guy that's going to run around like a maniac and escape. Not that Penix can't do that, but I would rather see him have some clean pockets to work from. I mean, it would be nice if we could just do that for every quarterback we get, but baby steps. But Jordan, appreciate your time here in this bye week, guys. As always, we'll have more stuff for you this week. We'll be back on Wednesday with Will McFadden to have Will talk us off the ledge. Will is probably the most positive person about this team left. So I was like, well, let's get someone in here that's actually more positive about the outcome of this season. So we'll have his more positive perspective on Wednesday. then I'll have that mock draft coming to you guys probably on Friday, and then football free weekend. So take a break, relax, maybe enjoy a stress-free Sunday, whatever works for you guys. Enjoy that. But before we take off, want to thank, of course, Jordan Watkins at Big 75 Fella, host of the Falcons Fade podcast, as well as wearing many other hats. Anything else you want to add, Jordan, before we sign off today?
Yeah, listen, I just want to say, and I know I talked about stress a little bit earlier, right? Like, that's how I feel like the team is. And of course, like I said, I wanted to make that reference because I wanted to make that to something everybody understands. I think everybody in their lives, you experience some type of stress. And so, not to go on a crazy, super long mental health, rant, but no, seriously, take care of yourselves, everybody. Obviously, like, mental health is crazy. Like, trust me, yes. I get it. I struggle with it at times. I know a lot of people do. So take some time for yourself. And I know for a lot of us, probably one of the reasons why we deal with mental health and we struggle with our mental health is because of the Falcons. Well, we don't have to see them this weekend. So
yep.
If you do get some time, seriously, and all due seriousness, if you get some time this weekend to do something for you, go on a walk, chill by the water, whatever the case may be, do it. Just take care of yourself.
Yeah. Have a nice week. Have a nice weekend. Do what makes you happy. And we'd all like for the Falcons to make us happy. That it seems like a very dicey proposition at this point. So I wouldn't depend on that. I would start making alternative arrangements for your happiness this year. But no matter how bad this team is, guys, Jordan and I will be here to talk you through the mess. But there's a slight chance, maybe still, that they're not a mess. But the it's really getting narrow now, like extremely narrow. So they're gonna have to thread the needle here. But stranger things have happened. We've seen some wild stuff happen. I mean, you look back to 2016, which is always the example. They weren't doing super great at the midway point,
and then they hit that stride. Yep,
they hit the hot streak. So there's always a chance they could do that. I would admit that would be probably one of the most unlikely things, but this has been a wild NFL season, so there's always the opportunity for that to happen. But guys, thanks again for tuning in today to Dirty Birds and Brews. Shout out to our sponsor, Bet Online. Make sure to check out the Patreon if you're interested in supporting. Like, subscribe on YouTube. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. We got several more shows coming to you this week, so stay tuned, guys. And once again, thanks for tuning in to the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll see you next time, folks. Have a great day.